something's creeping, it's right outside. So come on in, and don't be shy. We've got ghosts and UFOs. Brace yourself, get ready for the show. Don't be afraid of the dark. The fun's about to start. Nightmares, our tales will inspire. Oh, tonight at the Scaredy Campfire. Have you heard tell of a demon next door? Or maybe a cryptid on the lake shore? There's nothing too strange for us here. So if you're ready, stamp out your fear. Don't be afraid of the dark. The fun's about to start. Nightmares, our tales will inspire. Tonight at the Scaredy Campfire. Whoa, whoa.
Welcome back to episode 5 of the Scaredy Campfires campus. We're thrilled to bring you more spine-chilling tales from our brave listeners. A huge thank you to everyone who has shared their stories with us. Let's dive into the eerie experiences that await. Imagine coming home to an empty house, only to hear footsteps that shouldn't be there. A presence that feels familiar, yet entirely wrong. What if something or someone was pretending to be someone you trust? Tonight, we dive into a chilling encounter where reality twists into something terrifying. Our first story comes from Graveyard Girl on Reddit. When I was 14 or 15, I was living with my dad. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment that was upstairs. I wouldn't say that the apartment was a hotspot for paranormal activity per se, but shortly after we moved in, some strange things started to happen. For some reason, my dad's room always gave me the creeps. Mind you, I'm not someone who is scared of the dark at all. But whenever I'd walk by his room and he wasn't home and the door was open, it felt like someone was looking back at me through the darkness. I started to close his door when he wasn't home because the feeling of being watched from his room was overwhelming. One day, I had walked home from school and didn't see my dad's Jeep in the parking lot, so I figured he was out doing some handy work for someone. I went inside and put down my backpack and walked straight to his room and shut the door. I settled down in my room when I heard heavy stomping sounds from my dad's room. My heart stopped. My dad always wears these big steel toe boots that are good for outdoor work or construction, carpentry. It sounded exactly like his heavy step. I stopped for a moment to listen and walked close to his door. When I realized that the light was on from the crack at the bottom of the door, I said, "Dad," just to make sure my dad wasn't actually home. I know I didn't see his car outside, and I didn't see my dad taking a nap when I first went to close his door, and that the light was not on, but maybe I'm losing my mind. No reply. I kept hearing the heavy steps. My second thought, did someone break in and hide in my dad's room? I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed a knife as I kept hearing the sound of heavy boots walking around. I slowly walked back to his door and braced myself for a long minute before finally jolting the door open. But nothing. No one was there. I ran to his closet door and slid the door open, knife in hand. No one. At this point, I'm thinking I'm crazy, so I brush it off and go about my day. But I'd hear footsteps from time to time. Then, one weekend night, while my dad was working his 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. graveyard shift, as a security officer, I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorknob jiggling on front door. My eyes darted to the door as I froze, watching the doorknob jiggle for about a minute long before stopping. After it stopped, I got up to check the peephole and there was no one. I got in a bit of a habit of sleeping with the lights on and a weapon close, needless to say. When my dad returned home in the morning, he says, "I think someone tried to break in." I said, "What do you mean?" He signals for me to come to the outside of the door, and I see scratch marks and wood chipped away between the door and frame around the knob. We chalked it up to maybe some junkie trying to break in. We lived in an area that is notorious for drug use and poverty, but it freaked us out, and my dad was always anxious to leave me alone after that. He started texting more and calling during his night shifts to check in, as I wasn't sleeping much at the time obviously. Now one school night, while he was away working, everything seemed calm. No footsteps, no knobs jiggling, no ominous feelings in the apartment. I had texted my dad that everything was good and I was going to sleep, as I had to get up early for school. I wake up around 6:30 a.m. and got up to use the restroom. I was particularly tired this day and didn't want to get in the shower yet, so I went to lay back down and scroll on my phone for a bit. As I'm laying in bed, I hear the front door unlock. My dad usually gets off at 8 a.m., but I assumed maybe he got out early, as he did time to time. "Dad," I call out. No reply. But I heard a grunting sound. It sounded like my dad was hurt. Like the sound you make with your lips closed and you groan in pain if you stub your toe. But it was a deep groan. Working security at a casino and bar, my dad often would get into altercations with drunk patrons when he had to remove them. He'd been injured at work many times like this. "Dad, are you okay?" I called out again. No reply. The groaning became louder, and I heard a dragging sound on the carpet simultaneously. I'm thinking maybe he hurt his foot or leg. The dragging and groaning noise trailed from the living room to the kitchen and onto the tile floor. And then I heard the fridge open and then close. I called out one more time, "Dad!" No reply. Now I'm freaked out and sinking deep into my bed as my heart pounds. I heard the dragging noise on the carpet again, and the groaning noise started getting closer to my room, and then the groaning turned into a growling noise, like a dog or a wolf. And quickly the growling was a snarling evil sound that I can't get out of my head. I pulled the blankets over my head and started to cry and pray. I was shaking. The growling approached the doorway to my room. It was in my room, loud. I could feel the anger and threat directed towards me, and then I heard the sound of a gust of wind. My light bulb blew out and the lights went off. It became dark and cold suddenly. My fight or flight kicked in at this point and I jumped out of bed to face whatever it was, but I saw nothing, except strangely a gallon of water from our fridge in the middle of the floor. That was not there when I had gone to the bathroom minutes before. At this point, I'm too freaked out to pay that any mind, and I run out of my room to the front door and see no one in the living room, and the front door is locked. I unlock the door and run down to the stairs crying. I immediately called my dad, who left work and rushed home. I waited at the bottom of the steps until he arrived. He thinks that I had a bad dream to this day. We moved out soon after because I just couldn't stand to be there anymore. Whatever it was didn't seem like a trapped spirit. I never had another experience like this anywhere I lived, before or after, and it's my only true paranormal experience. I believe it was a demon in the apartment that was mimicking my dad. Why that place? I have no idea. Why did it mimic my dad? I don't know. But it didn't follow me when we moved. I'll never forget the sound of it growling at me. To this day, the echoes of those footsteps still haunt the storyteller's memory. Was it a trick of the mind, or was something truly lurking in the shadows, wearing the voice of someone they trusted? One thing's for certain, some presences never really leave us. Now, campers, childhood bedrooms are supposed to be places of comfort and safety, but what if the shadows in the corner aren't just tricks of the light? Our second story is shared by Cheeseman1234554321 on Reddit, who shares one young boy's experience with an unexplainable entity will leave you questioning just how safe the dark really is. Some background info. I am the oldest of 4 siblings. My family is very sensitive to paranormal events and experiences, and because of that, my mom had always trusted me and my siblings when it comes to ghosts and such. I also am very in tune with the supernatural and have a very hard time falling asleep because of this event. At the time, my mum was in an abusive relationship. We're fine now, thankfully, so it was safe to say that there was a lot of negative emotions and energy in the house that I think culminated in the house becoming haunted. Now, my experience. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, me and my brother, who is 4 years younger than me, shared a room together, and he had this little RC dirt bike that he loved to play with even though it didn't work anymore, as we were poor and didn't want to waste money on buying batteries for a toy. Now a closer four was broken off its hinges by the abuser in my mom's relationship at the time, and we didn't fix it because again, we were poor. But when me and my brother had been sent to our rooms to go to bed, I couldn't fall asleep because I was really creeped out for no reason, but my brother had fallen asleep quite quickly. And after about an hour or two, so around 12 a.m., I see a figure that was completely black, like darker than the dark, in my room, just standing in the corner facing me. Then it crawled up the wall and across the ceiling to over my bed, meanwhile facing me the entire time. This could just be sleep paralysis, but I haven't experienced it since, and I could move because I remember trying to hide under my blanket, but it never went away. When all of a sudden my brother wakes up and the figure disappeared, but then my brother's little dirt bike toy rolled out of the closet, blaring the alarm sound with its lights flashing. This then caused me and my brother to scream bloody murder, which woke up my sisters, who came running into our room because they were right across from me and my brother's room. And when they saw the bike flashing and playing an alarm, they also started screaming. Then my mum ran into the room and saw the bike, walked over and grabbed it, and the sound stopped. She let us stay in her room that night as we were all scared, obviously. She later told me that when she picked up the bike, she realized that the bike was set to off, and even if it wasn't, the bike was missing its batteries as previously stated. And even still, if it had batteries, the nose in the battery pack was still missing because of how bad up the toy was. So there was no possible way for that toy to have plausibly rolled out of the closet like that. I would like to say that even though I believe in the paranormal, I'm still very skeptical and logical, and even now, I have no possible idea on how that bike was on and drove out of the closet by itself without batteries, and even the event is etched into my brain because of the shadow man that I saw right before this. After this event, my siblings and me have seen things fly off shelves, and we have seen shadow people around the house. We have since moved out and are in a better place in life, but whenever I walk or drive past the house, I get this terrible gut feeling like I'm a little kid and the shadow person is still looming over my bed, staring at me, waiting for my return. And also, I'd like to state that this is not a story that I have made up. This is a legit experience that me and my siblings had that has remained in my memory because of how terrified I was. Thank you for reading this and have a wonderful night. The experience remains an unsolved mystery, forever burned into the storyteller's memory. Was it a dream, a trick of the mind, or was something truly watching from the darkness? Some questions, it seems, are better left unanswered. Home is supposed to be a place of safety, a space where we find comfort with the ones we love. But what happens when the walls around you seem to hold secrets? When whispers linger in the air and the feeling of being watched never truly fades? In tonight's third story, a couple moves into an apartment together, only to discover they might not be the only ones calling it home. The story is by user Unreal Evil 360 on Reddit. So I've always been very open-minded to the idea of the paranormal, but I very much believe there is usually a logical experience. As I stated in the title, we have been living in the same apartment for 3 years, and until about 2-ish months ago, everything had been normal. So in about the last 2 months, we have both been experiencing odd things, so I know for her, when she has told me, has been the uneasy feeling of being watched when alone, seeing shadows. The really odd ones to me are the noises. She said she heard kind loudish bang that something heavy hit the floor in another room a couple times. I've too had seen some odd shadows out of the corner of my sight and such, but nothing I would say is definitely paranormal. My strange experiences have been like one night I was at home and going to bed early while my fiancé was out. I went into my room and closed the door and got into bed. As soon as I laid down, the bedroom door flung open pretty hard and fast. I sat up and just stared at the doorway to see if I saw anything, but it seemed like nothing was there. One evening, a few weeks after the bedroom incident, I've had 0 odd experiences in this time frame. After getting home from work, I was loading the dishwasher. As I was bent over loading the bottom rack, I felt what was like a warmth on the back of my neck for a split second before it felt like a huge spider was crawling from the back of my neck to the top of my head. I freaked out for a second, but there was nothing and everything was normal. Then a couple of days later, I was doing some baking. I loaded the cupcakes into the oven, set a timer on my Google Hub, and went to the living room couch to relax while I waited. I was just browsing through Reddit on my phone and I briefly saw what looked like a black silhouette of the top half of a head peeking around the corner from the kitchen with the hands gripped around the corner like it was holding on. I dropped my phone down and got a solid second of eye contact with it, and then my timer went off and it vanished into thin air. My fiancé bought an old book that belonged to someone like decades ago, she believes, from a bookstore in LA when we went on vacation in the beginning of October, and she thinks the book is cursed or haunted. The book was The Ghost of Mystery Airport by Van Powell. There is no date on the book, but there is an old sticker of a child in very outdated clothes, 1930s sort of, on a tree, and it says "My Book" at the top and Buzz Pitkin at the bottom. Outside of that, we have had no new things brought or changed. We had some neighbors moved a month ago, and we recently found out that my fiancé is about 6 weeks pregnant. I think it's just stress and a lack of rest from both of us, and maybe we were just fueling paranoia. My fiancé is pretty firm that it's something paranormal. I figured I would try my chances at asking the kind folks of Reddit what their thoughts or opinions are on this, as we both lack any real knowledge of the subject of the paranormal. To this day, the eerie occurrences remain unexplained. Was it a restless spirit, an imprint of the past, or something else entirely? One thing is certain, some places never truly belong to just the living. Imagine laying in bed in the quiet of the night, only to hear your dog growling at something you can't see, something unseen, something that seems to be playing tricks with both you and your pet. In our fourth story by Crystal Moon on Reddit, we dive into a chilling experience where an uninvited presence haunts a home, leaving both human and canine questioning what's real and what's not. I was about 15 at the time. I'm 19 now, so I remember this well. I used to live with my mum and her husband in this house he had inherited from his uncle and aunt. We moved in. I was told that 2 people had died in the house, both being my stepdad's relatives. When I say I have several different stories I could tell you from this house alone, it was pretty spooky. It was an older house too, built in the 1800s. My room was upstairs, next to a bathroom and right across the hall from my mum's room, and then just a staircase down right to the door where you leave the house. I shared the room with my sister, but she was only there on the weekends because she lived with her mum primarily, so for the most part of it was me in this pretty big room. The house was huge. It was way too much space for me. I will share 2 things that I believe were somehow connected to each other because they both have to do with my dog Petey. The first thing that happened is, one day when I was just in my room, my dog started completely howling and growling at the corner of my room. Keep in mind, my dog usually more so whines. When he barks, like, I had never ever heard him bark like that. and it was one specific corner. My mom swore he was looking out of my window, but there was no way. He usually puts his paws up on the window when he's looking out the window, but he had his head down in the corner growling. The next thing that happened shortly after is I was downstairs and my mom was looking up the staircase to our rooms where my dog was trying to get into my room. I was not in my room, I was in the dining room downstairs. My room has sliding doors, kind of, so you can't just wiggle your way in and you have to manually slide the door. I'm standing in the dining room right next to the staircase watching my mum, and all of a sudden her face just drops and she looks terrified. I asked her what's wrong and she told me my door just opened for PT by itself. Needless to say, I slept in my brother's room that night. Despite the unsettling events that unfolded, the presence in the room never truly revealed itself. The dog, once terrified, now keeps a watchful eye on corners where shadows linger. Perhaps the ghost was never meant to be seen, but its presence, like the silence in the dark, is felt by both the storyteller and their loyal companion. Sometimes the things that haunt us the most are the ones we can't touch or see. Campers, sometimes the unexplained finds us when we least expect it. Imagine being alone in a place you thought you knew, only to experience something that shakes your very understanding of reality. In tonight's fifth story, we follow one person's chilling first encounter with the paranormal, an experience that would leave them questioning everything they once believed to be true. This story is by GH06 on Reddit. Okay, so this is basically my first time ever posting something on Reddit, so bear with me. This must have been the summer of 2022 when my friend had asked me to dog sit for her. She had a nice job dog sitting for a super rich family. I had to cover for her because she was going out of town the next day, so I came over and she starts showing me around. So I meet the dog, Hector, who I don't think liked me very much, and I also knew I would be staying the night, so I brought a bag, which my friend said I could take upstairs. So I went upstairs and saw the huge master bedroom with my friend's stuff in it, so I assumed I'd just take one of my niece's spare bedroom down the hall. So I find a nice room and put my stuff on the bed. After she showed me around, we just kind of chilled with the dog so he got to know me, but he was still being so goofy with me. Sorry for so much exposition, the story doesn't make sense without it, but spooky stuff is happening soon. So that night we head up to the bed, which is when my friend told me that we're just gonna sleep in the same bed because none of the others are made. So I go into the room that had my stuff and grab it. I've had a weird feeling this entire time at the house. I'm pretty in touch with my surroundings, so I can sense when there's another presence, and I couldn't get the pit in my stomach to go away. Nothing notable happens until the next afternoon. I'm officially alone in the house, but my mum was picking me up to go shopping around noon, so I'm running around trying to find my favorite pair of sunglasses I brought with me. I think maybe I should check in that spare bedroom. So I go and look around a bit, and then I walked out of the room. As I crossed through the threshold, there's a clatter on the floor. My sunglasses. It was impossible for them to have fallen from anything because they were in the middle of the floor. They would have needed to be thrown or dropped by something. I'm freaking out on the inside, so I say thank you and bolt out of there. I'm crying outside because I've never had anything paranormal happen to me, and also it's just so creepy. After my mum drops me back off an hour later, I decide that I need to check out the room. At this point, the dog is glued to my side, and as I go upstairs, the dog starts acting weird, and when I head out to the end of the hall, where the spare bedroom was, the dog literally stood in the doorway and would not let me pass. Which is how I knew this was paranormal. I tried to inch past the dog, but it just starts going crazy, barking and growling in the middle of the room. I ran downstairs, and that was basically it with the spooky stuff. I was still really scared, but nothing else happened other than the dog waking up in the middle of the night. Sorry if this was more build-up than payoff, but that's how it felt in real life. Even now, the storyteller can't quite explain what happened that night. Was it a strange trick of the mind, or something far more sinister? One thing's for certain, once you've had an experience like that, it's impossible to forget. The line between the living and the unseen can be thinner than we ever imagined. Sometimes a dream feels too real to be just a dream. What if a vision of someone you love, someone you've lost, wasn't a dream at all, but a final message? In tonight's sixth tale, a person experiences something that blurs the line between life and death, offering an eerie glimpse into the unknown. This story is given by user Zach the Person on Reddit. I don't believe in ghosts or paranormal connections and shit, but this one really baffles me to this day. Happened a couple of years ago, and I still can't forget. Warning, story is kind of a downer. Also sorry that it's long, but this is about as condensed as I could get it. Most of my friends have had trouble with substance abuse throughout their lives. Just the crowd I hung out with, I guess. Around the time of the story, one of my closest friends was clean off edge for the longest they had ever been. A couple of months, but still fantastic progress for him, and things were looking good. We were hanging out one day and he gave me some great news. Since middle school, he and his mum had been fighting for a medical malpractice lawsuit that happened to him when he was younger, and they won. He got something like 10 to 15k out of the deal, so most of what we talked about that day was just how he was going to buy his mum something nice and how he was going to use that money to finally go to college. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in years, and it was great. A day or two later, I was sleeping like normal when all of a sudden I woke up at around 1 in the morning. It felt great. In fact, I felt absolutely euphoric. I felt like I was laying in the sun on the most beautiful summer's day in a puddle of 1,000 puppies. And that was just the first second. The next second was that 1,000 times, and the next second that 1,000 times as well. Within moments, however, I went from, this is pretty nice, to, oh shit, something is seriously wrong, before blacking out. All of a sudden, I was walking down the stairs to my friend's basement. I was absolutely destroyed with shit thrown everywhere and empty bottles and syringes laying around. He was sitting there waiting for me on the couch with tears in his eyes. He just kept repeating that he was sorry and that he didn't want to hurt anyone. He said the money didn't last him long and he's back to being his broke-ass self, that he was sorry for bringing me there, and that he just needed to say goodbye to someone before finally saying goodbye to me and everything fading out in another wave of euphoria. Me being logical to a fault and pretty straightforward, I woke up the next morning thinking, damn, what a weird dream, but not much else of it. Wrote it down in a dream journal I was doing at the same time and completely forgot about it. Ended up going to work and class like normal. Then a couple hours later, my friend's mum called. She called me to break the news that my friend had passed away that night. Overdose. It wasn't until a couple of months later when another friend of mine, also ex-addict, was trying to console me by telling me how he went out with no pain and how it was probably the best way to go when things started to get really weird. He started to explain to me what an overdose actually feels like, the overwhelming euphoria, and how it's impossible to explain to someone who's never experienced it before, i.e. me. It was then that what he was describing started to sound really familiar, and I went to my phone, opened my dream journal, and started reading the entry from a couple of months back to him out loud. He pretty much said, yeah, exactly that. Where'd you get that story? And told him the whole thing. Both of us were at loss for words, and I still am. As I said, I don't believe in this stuff, and if someone told me this story, I would say they were high as fuck. But it's a memory that I will never forget. Even after all this time, the storyteller can't shake the strange, vivid encounter they had. Was it a supernatural visit, or just an eerie coincidence? Some moments leave us questioning the boundaries of reality, wondering if our loved ones are ever truly gone, or if they find a way to reach us when we need them most. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, only to discover that they shouldn't even be there at all? Tonight's seventh and last story takes us to a remote place where a student comes face to face with the impossible, a ghostly encounter that would leave them forever questioning the boundaries between the living and the dead. This story is shared by XX Noah_loves Jake XX on Reddit. Around 6 p.m. at Friday, I lied to my mum that I was gonna have sleepover at my friend's house. Then when I arrived at my friend's house, my friend was waiting for me in the taxi. We arrived at school at 6:30. We first went to the bathroom because me and my friend heard a rumor about 3 boys playing Bloody Mary, and they were found dead 13 years ago when I was 1 year that time, and since then they haunted the bathroom. We decided to stay there until we heard a scream. Me and my friend decide to run, then we stay at G4 classroom at the building C. Then suddenly we hear my G4 teacher calling our name, and we look up and she was there smiling. Suddenly we say, "I thought you were dead." She said, "Nope." Suddenly she said, "Let's learn, shall we?" We said no thank you, we know already, such as multiplying decimals, adding fraction, etc. Suddenly she disappeared. At first we didn't care and pack our sleeping bag, and we turn on AC and turn off the light. We only sleep for 4 hours until we heard a scream. Me and my friend woke up until we saw my maths teacher again, and she was like, "Hey, why are you there?" We say it's for camping until her eyes turn white, and with an evil smile, she starts chasing me and my friend. We run to the outside and we look back and she's gone. We were scared, but at the same time we were hungry and decided to steal food from canteen. Almost everything was locked except that stocking area. We went there, took 1 pack of Lay's, the yellow one, and we eat there, and soda we were eating. It was 2 a.m. that's why, and suddenly we heard someone walking. Somehow there was another group of friends staying there, but one without a head. My friend yells, "He didn't have a head." That person who didn't have a head burns his clothes so bad he was shirtless, and I gave him my dinosaur clothes, who I have it since I was 12. We decided to walk around, and suddenly we saw a ghost, and we all found a corpse. Something like a body part, I don't know if I'm right, and it was our maths teacher. We scream, pack our stuff, and run to the exit, and when we look back, we see our maths teacher waving goodbye. And she just vanished. We went to my friend's house to sleep since his parents aren't home, and we eat something healthy after this event. We swore not to stay at school overnight. Even after all these years, the storyteller can't shake the image of that ghostly figure. Was it a manifestation of grief, or a spirit caught in an endless loop? Some encounters leave us with more questions than answers, and perhaps in the world of the supernatural, not everything is meant to be understood. Thank you for joining us around the campfire tonight. Remember, if you have a story to share, we'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay safe and keep the fire burning bright.
As the night gets longer and the darkness creeps in, with the eerie silence broken only by whispering wind, come gather round the fire, the flickering flames, and hear the tales of the spooky and the strange. A chill up your back, a shiver up your spine. You'll be haunted by the things that you find. Legends will unfold and stories will be told at the scare